So I'm delighted to be here with Steve Miller, who is the core author, really, of our first ever impact report here at Cambio from back in 2025. Hello, Steve.
Hey Peter, nice to
Uh,
see you.
Pleasure is all mine because it has been quite a journey to get to the point where we've had this ready to go. And here in the middle of 2026, we're starting to look ahead to this year's, I suppose. I thought it might be a nice moment to really capture some of the insights, learnings, and the experience of actually building that together, because I know you have a long history of doing this over your career. But this is our first report. What the audience won't know is that we've known each other for more years than I care to remember,
Yeah,
across different organizations where we've collaborated. And I knew we needed to start with somebody that really knows their stuff. So I was delighted to partner with you on this. Just to get your initial reflections on the experience, I suppose.
yeah, it was great. Yeah, like you said, we obviously know each other going way back, and I've been sort of following Cambio's work and development over the last few years, and all the amazing stuff that you're doing. And so when you said that you were sort of looking at how to, I guess, report your impact and sort of bring it all together and all the great work that you've been doing over the last few years. I was very, very happy to help. And so what was your sort of I guess back to you, like what was your initial ambition for the report? Like what prompted you to sort of think about it, to want to make it happen?
Yeah, thanks, Steve. For me, it was how do we bring this to life? But bring it to life with some numbers and narrative that we can stand behind. And when I say this, I mean, we've been running now for 7 years. It's our 8th year. But I can honestly tell you that we've never been asked by funders, clients, etc. So what's your impact? I've always been very keen to be on the front foot with that. And a lot of the time I talk about the impact of our clients and the collective impact we've done over the time. But I know that isn't enough. So I felt like, look, I want to do this properly. I want to do it well. And I want it to be a repeatable process we can do every year. I don't want it to be a one-off. That was really critical. But I also wanted to make sure we had the right resource internally to make it happen to the quality I wanted to, and also the right expertise to again bring it to life in a way that I feel we could stand behind if we got any questions. And I think as the ambition for our work goes forward, we're going to get more questions, as we rightly should, about how do you know that what you do really works?
Yeah.
And at scale, ultimately. So for me, that was at the core of the ambition, is be able to really stand behind something that we could be proud of, that tells the story, but also has the facts and figures to back it up.
Really sort of came through when I started working with the team as well, because Cambio had already been collecting lots of data, trying to understand, I guess, how people are experiencing your work and what the sort of impact was on them and the outcomes they were sort of experiencing through the different I guess activities that they were participating in. And so that made it a lot easier, I think, to start, to get started in terms of bringing all of that data together and thinking about sort of organizing it, I guess, into a story that in terms of like communicating what it is that Cambio does and the sort of changes that it facilitates and the outcomes that it facilitates. And then the team were sort of really on it as well with all of that, and really helpful in terms of making sense of that data, contextualizing it, helping me I suppose access it, organize it, analyze it as well, and then also thinking about how it might be used in future. So that was great. And then we sort of talk a bit more later about like what that then looks like in terms of the impact report. But I think it only helped to like strengthen the story, I guess, that's inside the impact report.
Yeah, I agree with you. And I guess I'd be keen to hear from you. We sought to bring you in as an expert who's done this many times before. So you knew what the pitfalls were, what we should avoid, not trying to be perfect, all those different questions. What was your role like in kind of herding those cats to get it all together?
Yeah, I think I guess what I would say was that doing this type of work is more helpful when the organization has a clearer sense about what it is that it's trying to achieve. And I think Cambio has that. So you already knew like who your core audience were and what their problems are and how you can help them. and the sort of the outcomes that you wanted to facilitate in terms of, improving their understanding of sustainability, for example, or their use of systems thinking and their storytelling skills. And so that starts to give you the sort of the bones, I guess, of like a story of change, in terms of, the problem that Cambio is trying to address, what it does, and then what the outcomes are. And that you can use those bones or that structure to like then start organizing all the different bits of data that you have. And so in Cambio's case, there was feedback forms and surveys, there were case studies, there were testimonial quotes. Then obviously there was the sort of the tacit knowledge that existed within the team as well in terms of what they've been learning, working with different organizations and students and participants. And so so getting that sort of core, I guess, and that sort of core structure, you can then start to organize all those different bits of information and start to tell the story of Cambio's impact, which was, makes life a lot easier.
Brilliant. Yeah, it feels like that core repeatable structure that ultimately we're going to roll out next year and beyond, and obviously continue to tweak and build on that, feels really important to the process itself.
Yeah. Well, I guess like what are your sort of reflections on that journey in terms of getting to this point and being able to report on your impact for the first time?
Yeah, I guess I'm really proud of the fact that we were able to combine a bit of a story about the journey we've been on, as you say, over the last 7 years. Because we're a number of years into the process now, I think we have a more powerful story to tell, albeit I recognize in an ideal world we'd have done this at maybe a year or two earlier than we did. For the point at which we're scaling, I mean. And we were able to ally that with some really tangible case studies that I think showcase the types of clients we work with, the difference we make, so that by the time you finished it, if you do want to read it from cover to cover, you will have a full sense of where we've been, where we're going, and the difference we make. Yeah. And then in the middle, you've got, as you would expect from any impact report, you've got the data, you've got the stats, you've got a little bit of narrative and some quotes, and crucially, you've got the theory of change as well. So you've got all the key elements that I would hope and imagine to have in there, but it kind of flows. It's got, I've used that word already, the flow that takes the reader, whether it's a casual reader or somebody that really wants to understand what we do, through a journey that makes sense. Yeah. And I'm proud of the fact that it does make sense. And, it's not short. I've got the document in front of me. It's about 30 pages. So there's a lot in there, but I think it adds up to a story that is, I hope, compelling, and will become more compelling.
Yeah. No, I definitely agree with that. And I think the like I said, some of the things that really helped in terms of telling that story, like I said, is like you had a clear understanding of the problems you wanted to address, also where you're getting to, but also I think your work you had I guess developed and refined over the years so that there was some obvious like key ingredients and key activities that you delivered. So from the coaching and then the training and the different workshops and the sort of online courses, they're sort of clear things that you can then start to see, start to hang that story on and start to sort of associate like the outcomes data with, so you can start to see what the impact of those individual activities is. And then also I think the sort of the values of the organization were like really deeply embedded as well, so you could start to see, well, you're not just delivering these sort of workshops or courses, because obviously lots of organizations deliver those types of things, but it's about how you're delivering it and the way that the values are embedded in the way that that's delivered. And that in turn is what is facilitating the impact. And so once you can start unpicking that, then that's like how you're telling the story of change, and Cambio's change in particular. And that's the type of thing that sort of always recommend to organizations to better understand, is about what is it that's unique about what you do that is contributing to change.
Absolutely. And making it clear that, what we're doing and the way we're doing it is, subtly and uniquely ours, I suppose, in amongst what is potentially quite a complex array of activities. We're not relying on one vehicle to deliver change by design, but you want to ensure that the complexity isn't complicated. Let's put it that way.
So what are you most proud of, I guess, with regards to Cambio's impact?
Yeah, this is a really difficult question for me because the cop-out answer is all of it. But in reality, that there's always been one piece that I felt was really underpins the kind of client work we do, the mission and the vision that we set out to accomplish, way back in 2019. And that was culture. Because the organization is called Cambio, which of course means change in Spanish and Italian, effectively. But when we talk about change, I think it's almost it's very hard to remove change from culture. Two things go together. If we want to create embedded change with a legacy, you need to address culture. And so the segment in the report around culture, I felt had to be right, but also we had to have enough data to back it up. I think the challenge that we both had, Steve, wasn't it, that at this stage, getting enough meaningful data to make claims and assertions that held water was the hardest part of this. What we were trying to avoid was saying something that didn't have any kind of rigorous backing, but also saying something that meant something as well. It couldn't be sufficiently watered down to the point where it didn't have any resonance. So, I've got the report in front of me, and I think, we'll be showing it on the screen. The segment on organizational culture towards the middle of the report, we've got some really interesting statistics and some examples really about where we've made a difference that I'm really proud of. So, particularly 85% number around where participants feel as if they have a stronger alignment with their own organization's culture. So they feel like they're on the same journey as the organization, and maybe in some way they've changed that journey. And crucially, 100% understands and agree that culture really matters. Sandwich in the middle of that, 2/3 say that they feel more able to influence the culture, which is the hard bit, I guess. Once you understand it and you accept it's important, changing it is the key thing if you feel it needs to change.
Yeah.
So I was sort of proud that we're able to talk about that, because I know how important it is. I also know how hard it is to talk about that in a meaningful way, because hard to measure and because we're still scaling. We're on that journey.
That's I guess sort of one of the things that I sort of most enjoyed, I guess, about this process is developing the sort of theory of change for Cambio's work. And so you're sort of taking all of that great stuff that you've been sort of I guess organically developing over the last 7 years, but also like iterating and improving the whole time, and organizing that into a story which sort of tells the journey from the problems that you've identified and that you're trying to help address, and then the sort of the key ingredients in terms of your activities that you deliver and the way that you deliver them, and how that then is contributing and facilitating that change. So how that is then supporting developments and improvement in organizational culture, and also people's ability to manage change within their organizations, as well as then obviously their understanding of sustainability and systems thinking, their use of storytelling skills, for instance. So we've pulled all of that through, I think, into that structure, which then sort of clearly shows how Cambio is like addressing those problems and the sort of long-term effects of that.
Yeah, Stephen. Also, I'm conscious that you're involved in writing reports, or these sorts of reports all the time. And so you see a range of statistics and case studies and examples. Was there a number or something in the report that stood out for you? Maybe that's something that surprised you or was interesting to you?
Yeah, I think there's a few actually that stand out. So there's we identify through this process, we were able to identify a sort of a common or like consistent patterns, I guess, in the types of outcomes that Cambio was facilitating. So we looked at how Cambio sort of supports people's entrepreneurial skills and the sort of ability to think entrepreneurially. And you can see here that there's this increase in people's self-reported entrepreneurial confidence from when they started the program to when they sort of finished. And we see that sort of pattern occurring across a range of different outcomes. So you'll see that when it comes to sustainability, there's an increase here. So 25% of participants report an increase in their confidence discussing sustainability in a professional setting. And then we see the same pattern occur again with systems thinking as well, whereby perhaps people were sort of less familiar with that concept at the beginning. And then at the end, almost all of the sort of participants are reporting that they're sort of confident about that, or they feel very familiar with that concept. So I think these are really good examples of the change that can happen just even within a potentially short space of time. And then, as I said before, like how that then sort of contributes to longer term changes in terms of what people then go back to their various organizations, and then are able to do differently as a result.
I'm really conscious that we have made a strong effort in the report to bring to life some of the statistics and again the narrative in a way that feels, I think, hopefully interactive and engaging. One of those for me, if I talk about culture, is the iceberg model. So Eggershein's model of
Hmm.
culture. Um, I think I read that Eggerschein passed away this year. I think possibly as we were building this, and I've been referring to his work for a number of years now. I think it is seminal. And because it's such an easy way to explain such an important concept that, again, I feel people underestimate the importance of. So I think towards the back on page 23, we've got this our version of that iceberg model and all the things that you can see go into it that are under the surface, clearly the majority, where I feel we can make a difference on top of those things that are physical artifacts that can be seen and touched. So our ability to influence that iceberg, if you like, especially beneath the surface, is something I'm really proud of because, as I said, I think it underpins a lot of the other work we do, even if we don't necessarily position our products and services as culture change artifacts.
Yeah.
I'm not selling a cultural change program necessarily, but culture change is in there. It's part and parcel of it. It may not be in the title, but it's built in. So I'm quite pleased we were able to convey that in the second half of the report, actually right before the case study section, because I think it really matters and people often, again, as I said earlier, overlook that about our work.
Yeah, yeah, and I think this is sort of important stuff, right? Because I think a lot of organizations will sort of I guess talk about some of the stuff they want to facilitate in terms of, we want to I guess like talk about sustainability, but actually like sort of things like culture can potentially get in the way of like enacting those changes. And so if you're not also looking at like culture and behaviors and sort of existing habits within an organization, then actually that's potentially going to inhibit your ability to achieve those outcomes. So I think that's obviously great in terms of what Cambio is doing here in terms of like introducing those methods and techniques and ways of thinking to help people then embed that learning when they go back to their organizations or different projects as well. Yeah.
I'm really conscious, Steve, actually, in this report, there's almost a report within a report because I know how much work went into the theory of change
Yeah.
and the data behind it, and then obviously trying to find a way of diagrammatically showing it in the report that was, digestible and, fitted on a page or two. What was the process for you like of actually delivering on that particular element of it?
Yeah, I think it was great to get sort of stuck into it and then to work with the team in terms of sort of developing it and iterating it, refining it, and sort of including yourself. I think because as I've said, the work of Cambio was I guess clearly sort of articulated in terms of the challenges that you exist to address and the types of outcomes that you're trying to facilitate. That made it easier to start sort of populating a theory of change. And so, for those that are not familiar, theory of change is a framework that you can use to basically describe the problems your organization is trying to address, how you do it, and then what's going to change as a result of that. And so we could start taking the work that Cambio had sort of developed and organizing it into that framework. And what I particularly liked about this process is that we, I guess, we're sort of taking something that was sort of quite mature as an organization. I know sort of 7 years is still relatively young in the grand scheme of things, but it had been sort of developing over a few years and start breaking it down into its components. So almost like you would with a recipe, right? So you're trying to understand what the ingredients are. And so that enabled us to see sort of what the core activities are, how they're delivered, what comes out of those, and then start organizing I guess, your data and the feedback you've been receiving into sort of common themes or groups of outcomes. And so we identified that actually there's a whole range of outcomes that you facilitate in relation to developing organizational culture. So you can see that on the screen here in terms of, increased team cohesion and readiness for change, alignment around purpose, and also shared understanding of organizational culture. And these are all things that people have reported that they sort of learn about. And, we see those as sort of key to facilitating development and change of organizational culture. So, like, bringing everything together into this sort of framework was really helpful. And then also I think that process is almost as helpful as the diagram as well, because it gives everyone, it starts to help people develop a sort of shared understanding of what you're trying to achieve and how you're trying to achieve it, and then gives you a sort of common language that you can use as an organization and sort of tell the story to others as well. So that was really enjoyable. And then obviously, it looks great as well. I can't take credit for this because it's been designed by a professional designer who's done an excellent job. But I think, it's a really good way to see, to understand the work of Cambio just on sort of 2 pages there.
It talked about culture earlier. Early on in the report, we talk about the 7 different areas we work in: entrepreneurship, sustainability, systems thinking, organizational culture, leadership, change management. The other big one for me is storytelling, because if you can do all those things, you still have to tell a powerful story and communicate it well.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what the report does really well, especially at the end, is those short case studies of particular projects that all, I think, involve pretty much collaborations. Some of them are international collaborations, so it's certainly not just Cambio. There's other partners involved, and what those case studies are able to bring to life, I think, are obviously some of the results and outcomes and what we did, but I think you get under the skin of some of the beneficiaries and actually how they felt about it.
Yeah.
So the intellectual change, but also the emotional difference that some of this work has made to them, or indeed is making, because if I look at them now, some of these are ongoing. This is year 1, or it's a multi-year project, so that's
Yeah.
exciting. I don't know how you felt about that, sort of putting it together from slightly arm's length. Was there something that stood out for you in the way the case studies came together?
Yeah, I think it was great to sort of bring these together in sort of almost like a story format, because you've got the examples here of like the sort of initial challenge that was sort of briefed in and how you responded in terms of what you delivered, but also the way in which the work was actually delivered as well. So in this example, like the Global Futures Challenge here, you can see that this is about supporting young social business founders. And you delivered a sort of range of different leadership workshops that then were delivered in this sort of very sort of collaborative way, I guess, and sort of you can see the benefits of your approach in terms of what was then changed at the bottom. So, participants talked about leaving with strength and confidence in leadership, a more strategic approach to sustainability, and also they left with practical tools to help them navigate complexity within the social ventures that they're developing. So that sort of structure and format was sort of really helpful, I think, in terms of sort of articulating that in just one example, but then we're obviously able to replicate that across sort of multiple examples here, and you can start to see how that sort of approach works in a range of different contexts. And I think the sort of 2 examples here of the Global Futures Challenge, and then the work of Celine with the ABO social enterprise, who like participated in that program, they're really very complementary case studies. And yeah, it sort of just tells a story of change that Cambio facilitates. But what about you, Peter? What anything sort of stands out for you from any of these case studies, or the sort of approach generally?
Yeah, I think the sort of counterpart to the Global Future Challenge case study is the Ignite case study. That's currently very much a UK-based partnership, but it is a partnership nonetheless. It brings together beneficiaries, entrepreneurs, it brings together funders. The important work that the Ford Family Foundation do, graciously supported by Barclays. You get the sense there's a bit of momentum behind the program, which we've been able to communicate, I think, through our role in some of that, and the fact that that's been developing over the last few years. I think the picture and the quote bring it to life in terms of what the beneficiaries gain from the experience, which I think is really critical. And again, the format is consistent, so you can see we really give strong credence to, I think, the difference we were able to make, as in what did we do that's perhaps different from the ordinary, and then what was the fundamental change that was created. Because I think they're the most interesting questions. We
Mm.
could have spent a lot more of the page, if you like, with these case studies talking about what was delivered, and I think we consciously chose to focus most of it on what's the difference and what next.
Yeah, yeah. And I think that's sort of what I recommend to lots of organizations as well, actually, is I think lots of organizations get stuck maybe when they're thinking about impact, or just talking about like what they did, and then potentially sometimes like what the outputs of that work were. But actually, what's more useful to know for you as an organization, but also for others that you're working with, is like how that work was delivered, and also then what changed in those people as a result. Which is, again, what we've tried to do here. I think what we've done throughout the report, actually.
And on that note, actually, I just find having the physical copy in my hand or the virtual copy on my email exchange just enables me to say, look, if you want the detail, it's there.
Hmm.
I don't need to send a bunch of attachments. We don't need to have a long discussion about the variety. We can share that and we can zero in on what is important to that particular stakeholder in the moment. So it's just a really great companion piece to the work we do when we travel and when we, connect with stakeholders and clients.
Yeah, great. Yeah, I think it's hopefully a very useful tool for Cambio, and then also for others. I think they're interested in this space, and how to sort of embed some of this learning into their own organizations. And then should we talk about the sort of the development of the report and sort of what was happening behind the scenes? Um, and then so obviously you were traveling quite a fair bit whilst we were doing this.
Yeah.
And I think you maybe were in Beijing when we sent over like the very first draft of this. Do you want to talk a bit more about that?
Yeah, absolutely. So was traveling quite a bit during January, February. Um, and so a lot of this was happening alongside that. So I was dipping in and out as needed, as required. Uh, and I recall the flight back from Beijing to London, which is about 10 hours. I downloaded the latest version of the report, which had got inputs from a range of authors. And you could really tell at that point that actually it had a range of authors. And I would say it probably took up to, this is going to sound crazy, but up to half of the journey to really read it word by word, add comments, and then read it again. And there was lots of track changes. So it's fair to say that by the end of January, I wasn't 100% confident we were going to get there, because it mostly felt like an edited like multi-chapter book almost, where you've got different voices and different bits of the organization were doing their thing and doing it well, but it didn't feel like one author and one document. I think it's testament to everyone involved that within a matter of genuinely weeks, we were able to get to the point where, not just the spelling mistakes, but crucially the kind of the textual fits, the right case studies, the right imagery, of course, and then the right flow was all layered in. So I think having faith in the process, where it would have been easy to have not gone back to the drawing board, but to set out, hold on, are we going to achieve what we want to achieve, felt important in that moment.
Yeah. I mean, this is actually, I think, like a common challenge with like impact reports, but also particularly when you're maybe doing it for the first time. And so, like, designers always talk about something called like the fuzzy front end, where when you're like beginning a project, everything can feel a bit um, uh, not very neat, I guess, and like a little bit fuzzy. And it's not quite exactly where you want it to be. But that fuzziness is quite important, because that having that sort of first draft gives you something to respond to, in terms of saying, well, actually, I want more of this and less of this, and this is the direction to head into, and this is the direction not to head into, etc. And so, yeah, it was certainly useful, I think, to sort of get your feedback earlier in that process, rather than us heading like too far down the wrong path, I guess. And then it just helped like improve the report, like you say, which is now really good.
Yeah, I feel like there were two insights in the process that were important from my perspective. One was what is the right flow, as in what segments in what order and how do they all add up?
Mm,
Um, and I felt that that was my job to get that right. And it was on me. It's my responsibility to make sure that was good. And I recall there were some comments you made, in and around that draft that were, let's go back to basics. Let's remember what we're trying to achieve. Let's, claim what we can claim based on the data we have. Let's
yeah,
try not and say everything we want to say. Let's not let perfection be the enemy of the good. That sort of narrative that I felt to the collective team involved, because as you know, it was a fairly large cast of people involved in the
yeah,
background, as it needed to be to gather the data and put it in all together and design it. That at that point I felt was the tipping point where whether it felt like it was on the flight, obviously it happened around that, rather than in that moment. That's when things really were on track and felt like they were heading towards a positive conclusion. So those are the key moments that I recall.
yeah. No, that's great. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the that's again like another thing that I've sort of noticed when I'm working with other organizations, and I guess was true here, is that when you're like really passionate about your work, everything or a lot of things matter to you. But when you're trying to sort of communicate that to others and tell a story about change, I guess you really need to find like what are the actual key components here and what are the sort of key sort of ingredients. And I think that's what the sort of process that we ended up going through really is like really sort of then zooming in and saying like these are the key things that matter to Cambio and that are important and that also that help facilitate the impacts that we have. And this is the story of change that we want to tell. So it was it was like an iterative process, like you said. But it was great to sort of have the team involved thinking about that and sort of everyone moving along on that journey together.
On that, I want to ask about the visuals because it's easy to assume when you read it that the visuals are the purview of the designer. And in reality, of course, the designer needs a brief about what we're looking to create. And as you know, we use a number of models. So I mentioned the iceberg model, something called the purpose sandwich, which we've sort of created for ourselves based on a bunch of theory that's already out there. And what was your experience of actually trying to get those images and the visuals to where we wanted them to be, based on not just the branding but also the fit of the document?
Yeah, I think it's interesting because I think with well my approach anyway to sort of writing reports is certainly in the earlier drafts when you're using visuals is maybe just to use some like draft holding images just so to convey where they're going to go and in what they potentially might look like. And I think in the first instance maybe sort of constructed this out of a table in Word or something similar. Um, but then obviously passed this on to the designer, and then we went through a few sort of iterations of what the sandwich could look like. And obviously, I think that one of the options that came back looked like a McDonald's advert or what have you. But so we're also thinking about what is like appropriate to the tone and the style of the document. And so I think what we ended up with here is a really great visual representation whereby um, you can see that as essentially building blocks, but also clearly, obviously, some type of sandwich, right? In terms of the sort of conveying the point, and so that just I think also helps just getting the concept across and the sort of the key points across there in terms of what it is and how you might use it.
Yeah, absolutely. I think at one point we had a sort of hamburger image, which probably wasn't
Yeah,
the right imagery we were looking for the purpose sandwich. It's surprisingly hard to convey a sandwich and do it in a serious way about the kind of work we do, but we got there in the end. Yeah, and I think the visuals really speak for themselves across the report. Not only the on brand, but they also make sense in the context of the work we're doing. Um, and they sort of bring the text to life, I think, which is obviously all the things we want them to do.
yeah.
Um, from my point of view, the least enjoyable part of any work like this is always the selection of photographs, because
Oh yeah.
invariably it's a selection of photographs of me. I'm not quite sure how so many photos of me have ended up in the report. It has been noticed by others that have read it, saying you're in there a lot. That
There you
wasn't
are.
by design, but certainly we have removed for every one good photo at least one photo of me with my mouth wide open, mid conversation with somebody where the photographer has caught a slightly dodgy image. But On a more serious note, I think there are some lovely images in there of the work of some of the people we've worked with over the last few years. And interestingly, there's so many more of those images I think we can pull into future reports. So we've got a bit of a treasure trove of that. And I suspect, there's a question here about where do we go next year? Obviously, you update the data, you perhaps build on those case studies, but the structure broadly remains the same. But there are still some innovations and things we can bring in. And I'd love to be able to show more about the faces of the beneficiaries that, that tells the story of some of the journeys they've been on as well.
And I'm just interested, Peter, like given your, this is your baby effectively, you've sort of grown this organization. What was it like for you, like sort of getting physical copies of the report for the first time?
Yeah, it was quite an emotional moment. It was also quite a tiring moment because they came in big, heavy boxes, and trying to get them up to the top floor of the office I'm in now was actually quite a feat. But yeah, it was yeah, having it in your hand is a powerful moment. Yeah, for me, again, having a hinterland of working in foundations and networks where a lot of the lifeblood of the work is, the next publication, because the next publication speaks to the program you've done and the work you've achieved. So there's a bit of a rite of passage of having this report because it speaks to a volume of work that's gone before it. It's not a report for a report's sake. It genuinely speaks to the work that's been done. So it felt like the culmination and a representation of that work. In that sense, it almost felt like a representation of 7 years of work, even though, of course, it's focused on 2025.
Mm-hmm.
It did have echoes of the journey and obviously where we've been. So it was a really proud moment. In my mind, it probably represented a milestone in the growth of the organization in terms of impact and in terms of the scale of what we do. So yeah, it was a powerful moment. And one of those moments that when the year's done, it will be a highlight, it will be a celebration moment.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, and I think, given the work that you've been doing and the way that it's developed over the years, I think it's very powerful to be able to sort of articulate and convey the the journey that you've been on, but also the sort of mission that you're on, I guess, in terms of like I say, the sort of the problems that you're helping to try and address and how you're doing that, and then what's happening as a result and how people are responding to that. And having the opportunity, I think, to sort of put that down into writing and then also then publish that and be able to share it with others, I think is really really powerful. And not many organizations or not as many organizations as should do that. So kudos to you for sort of taking the initiative and doing that off your own back as well. Yeah, it's really, really great.
Yeah, thank you, Steve. And I think for me, it did surprise a few people as well, in that they weren't aware of some of the work we've done, or perhaps some of the scale of the work we've done, or indeed the team that's involved in doing it. I think often when people talk about Cambio, they see me and they think, well, you've done all this. And I'm like, no, absolutely not. It's a collective effort. We built this together and it continues to grow. It's when we started out in 2019, it was me. Now it is very much we. And the report, I think, speaks to that journey. So I'm quite pleased we now have an artifact that opens people's eyes to that journey and the work we do collectively.
Yeah, great. And I think it's just another sort of string to the bow of a Cambio as it sort of develops further, and then also hopefully inspiration to other organizations as well who are looking to do similar things.
Yeah, thanks, Steve. So if I think about the last year and the hundreds of entrepreneurs who've been able to support through partners, crucially, because we do a lot of our work in partnership across the countries that we've worked in, which again is in the lovely infographic early on in the report. I think it's over 30 countries across the last 7 years. It's a genuinely international affair because, of course, it's a genuinely international movement and challenge that we're facing. I think the other thing I should mention here really is that over the last 7 years, we've really been on our own journey of an initial focus on the impact that can be generated and scaled through business, different varieties, to positioning that within a wider narrative of sustainability. And I think increasingly now in 2026, resilience in the face of some of the big global challenges we're facing. And the ability to bring all that together and have the same conversation in one place, it's been a journey we've been on. It's not been easy, and I think the report again speaks to that journey and is an artifact that allows us to have that conversation again in the wake of AI and the increasing need to be seen to be working physically and virtually effectively. I think the impact report is a bit of a bridge for those conversations and for that opportunity. So, whatever happens in the world with technology and the other big global climate challenges we're facing, the ability to prove and then showcase what you've done, the difference you've made, isn't going to go away.
Yeah, I agree. But I think also the ability to I guess understand whether your work is making any difference, but then also how. And that I think is quite key in order to address some of the challenges that we sort of face as a society. Because if organizations don't understand whether something is working, but also how it's working and how to do more of it effectively, then there's the chances of addressing some of those issues are sort of lessened, I would say. So I think doing this type of thinking is really important for lots of organizations, obviously particularly for Cambio's work, because you're obviously working with students, participants and organizations to help them think about how to embed sustainability into their work in particular, which is particularly important given the sort of climate crisis and the other things that are happening in the world. So it's really important, I think, to sort of capture and articulate that learning as well as obviously demonstrating the impact of your work as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you, Steve. And as we come towards the conclusion of the conversation today, I was asked by my social media team to include a call to action, as any good podcast or conversation does. And I think that, in all seriousness, if I could claim two, the two I would claim are, first of all, download the impact report, have a look at it, see if there's something in there for the work you're doing, whether it's a case study example, a statistic, something in our journey that brings to light something on yours, whether you're an entrepreneur watching this back or a partner or somebody we've worked with before. Hopefully you'll resonate with some part of that. And the second call to action would be, if you get the chance to work with Steve on impact measurement or building reports, I would strongly encourage you to, because it was a seamless process. And I think without that expertise, we wouldn't have got to the high quality output that we did. So, I wouldn't want to finish the conversation without a big thank you to Steve and the rest of the Cambio team that played a really important role in getting us to this point.
Yeah, thank you, Peter. And thanks to you for inviting me to work with you on this, and then also to the rest of the team as well for everything they contributed, which is really fantastic. And I think we ended up with a really good report as a result.
Thank you, Steve.